Money Show with Rick Schaefer and Susan Kaplan.
Welcome back. As I have been promising you all day, we have a guest for the remaining part of the Best Money Show on radio. And joining us today is Rich Rosa, who is an attorney and a buyer's broker with Buyers Brokers Only, LLC. In the interest of full disclosure, I should mention to you, and if you listen to the last ad, you would have figured this out, that Buyers Brokers Only is an advertiser here on Boston Herald Radio, and we're very happy to have them as such. Rich, thank you very much for joining us.
Hey, Rick, thanks for having me.
Our pleasure. We're going to get into the specifics about Buyers Brokers Only in a bit, but quickly, give us an overview of your career, how you came to be an attorney, and then how you came to be a buyer's broker with Buyers Brokers Only, LLC.
Sure. My undergraduate degree is in journalism from Northeastern University. I went to New England School of Law. I've been a licensed attorney since 1995, so almost 20 years now. Mm-hmm. I don't practice law anymore. About 10 years ago, with my business partner, Dave Kress, we started Buyers Brokers Only, and that's what I do full-time.
Did you, when you were practicing law, did you practice real estate law, or did you practice some other type of law, or a mixture of many types?
It was a mixture of real estate law, and I did quite a bit of trial work.
So it was kind of a mix.
Yes.
What gave you the idea to start Buyers Brokers Only?
Well, it's interesting. Dave was actually my law clerk when he was in law school, mm-hmm. and when he graduated, we got to talking about sort of what he was going to do after he graduated, and one of the things that I suggested to him was that he consider maybe looking into to working as a real estate broker, because around the time you graduate from law school, you get a lot of friends that are at that point in their life where they're going to be buying houses, and I told him that might be something that he could help his friends out with, and he did, and it worked out pretty well, and we started talking about how, we kind of felt like buyers didn't get quite the same representation as sellers, that the industry is kind of seller-focused. So that's where we sort of came up with the idea of simply representing buyers only.
It's interesting. I hadn't thought of this, but when I got out of law school, I actually had transferred from the original law school I went to Northeastern, and because of that, I was basically a semester behind. So the long and short of it is, I ended up having to take the bar in the winter as opposed to in February, as opposed to July, right after people graduate, which is when most people take it. In any event, when I got out of law school, I realized, and I think it's still the same in Massachusetts, if you have graduated from law school, you can get your real estate broker's license without having to take all the tests. So I ended up becoming, at that time, a rental agent, and then I did some sellers. I was a seller's agent for a while after I got a law school, and I've been in real estate not as a broker, but in many other capacities for most of my life. So it's interesting. I sort of was on somewhat of a parallel path to your partner. Explain what a buyer's broker is. Most people know what a seller's broker is, but I think a lot of people are still not fully versed in what a buyer's broker is.
Sure. Well, in Massachusetts, there's basically two types of buyers brokers or buyer agents. One is what is referred to as a designated buyer agent. The other is what's called an exclusive buyer agent. Mm-hmm. Like you said, everyone sort of understands that the listing agent represents the seller. They have an obligation to look out for the seller's best interest, get the highest price, things like that. The buyer agent, whether it's a designated buyer agent or a exclusive buyer agent, their duty is to the buyer, not the seller. Mm-hmm. The difference, however, is when you're a designated buyer agent, you work at a real estate firm that represents both buyers and sellers. So the issue that can come up is that if that designated buyer agent that you're working with is listing property for sale, and you choose to make an offer on that property, that buyer agent then turns into what's called a dual agent. And what that means is that dual agent is then representing both the seller and the buyer. So as you can see, that could be a problem. You're no longer getting, the full 100% loyalty that you were getting prior to that. The other issue that comes up is that if you're interested in a property, the buyer is interested in a property that someone else in that designated buyer agent's firm is listing for sale, that designated buyer agent represents you. Everyone else in their office does not represent you. In fact, they technically represent the seller. And so you could see where there could be a little bit of a problem there where, your buyer agent works with the listing agent in the same company. There's also situations sometimes where companies are giving buyer agents compensation or incentives to have their buyers buy properties that are being listed by that company. With an exclusive buyer agent, you never have to worry about whether or not they're going to try to get you to buy a house they're listing, because they don't list any property for sale. You don't have to worry about anybody else in their office listing property for sale, because everyone in the company just represents buyers. So it's really, as you can see, lots of people use designated buyer agents too, but as you can see, it's sort of a cleaner transaction when you're dealing with an agent that's only representing buyers.
I'm surprised, and I must admit I wasn't aware that companies that do dual agents and use designated buyer brokers as opposed to exclusive buyer brokers will give an incentive to their buyer brokers to sell properties within that are being listed by that firm. I would think that would be on its face a conflict of interest and illegal, but apparently Massachusetts has not seen fit to make it illegal, correct?
That's my understanding, yeah, that does go on. I don't know the specifics of it. I've never worked with a traditional real estate firm, but it is my understanding that is something that happens. Whether it's compensation or some sort of other incentive, I'm not 100% sure. But Massachusetts does allow dual agency.
Yeah, one thing pops to mind, because I know a lot of people will have a dual. When they're buying a piece of property, oftentimes people will use an attorney to represent them, but also use that attorney as the bank's attorney. But just to make a delineation, for the most part, if an attorney is representing you as the buyer and also representing the bank, the interests of the buyer and the bank are usually pretty much the same. So the chances of there being a conflict of interest are slim to none. But if a broker is representing both the buyer and the seller, on its face, it's quite obvious that there are all kinds of conflict of interest that can come up. So I would say, and I've said, when I've been talking about your being on today, that I used to not be a big fan of buyer agents for a number of reasons, but I've become a fan of them. But I think what I I'll caveat that by saying, if you use a buyer broker, I think you should use only an exclusive buyer broker. I think there's too many conflict of interest involved in using a designated buyer broker. And you've done a very good job of explaining why.
And another way to look at it, too, is you're not just hiring an agent, you're hiring a company. And so, you have to understand what that whole company is doing, not just necessarily what your agent is doing.
In the past, and I think a lot of people still, as I said, they don't understand buyers brokers and all the things attached there, too. In the past, at least in some states, and I think in Massachusetts, there were situations where a buyer's broker was sometimes compensated by actually charging a fee to the buyer. That's not the case anymore, correct?
Well, different buyer agents have different business models. We do not charge our clients any fee.
Okay.
The typical situation is a seller hires a listing agent.
Yeah.
That listing agent and the seller come to an agreement on what the commission will be. In Massachusetts, it's almost always 4 or 5%.
Yeah.
That listing agent then puts the house on the MLS.
Yeah.
And on the MLS, there's what's called the cooperating commission, and that's the commission that's paid to whatever buyer agent brings the buyer. So the seller is essentially paying both sides of the commission. And typically that commission is a split between the listing agent and the buyer agent, although the listing agent is not under any obligation to make it an even split.
Okay.
But it typically is.
So basically, it's the same as, for example, if a seller's agent lists a property and then an agent from another agency who's not acting as a buyer's broker necessarily, but brings someone who ultimately buys the property, then the listing agent ends up splitting the commission with them. So it's really the same thing with the designated buyer's broker, correct?
Correct. It is. That is the same thing. And I think that what you were talking about, where some people sort of have the idea that maybe it was better to go at it alone, is because there's this myth out there that somehow if you don't have a buyer agent, that you're going to get a better deal because there's going to be no commission paid to a buyer agent. But the reality is the listing agent is going to keep the entire 4 or 5%, as opposed to splitting it. So basically, it's not going to cost you anything to have a buyer agent, and you're going to get representation as opposed to not having any representation, and nothing's really going to change other than the listing agent gets the full commission. And of course, the listing agent doesn't have, We've already mentioned that their obligation is to the seller, but I think one thing that a lot of buyers don't quite get is that there's no obligation from that listing agent to hold anything that they're told confidential. In fact, they've got a duty to tell the seller if anything they're told by the buyer could help in negotiation. So it's really a better situation when you have a buffer between yourself and the listing agent being your buyer agent.
I've said for a long time, one of the reasons I think people always should have attorneys, both buyers and sellers, is to have one of the things that the attorneys act as is a buffer, and to have that additional buffer of having a broker is a plus. We're going to have to take a break in a second, but one other myth that's still out there. I know that when buyers brokers first came on the scene, a lot of sellers agents were. Not all of them, but some were hesitant to work with buyer's agents for any number of reasons. So in some cases, if you had a buyer's broker as representing you, it could hurt you as a buyer. My impression, however, is that buyer's brokers have been so totally accepted at this point that that's not the case anymore. Is that correct?
Yeah, I would agree. I think that most agents are representing buyers and sellers, doing both sides of the transaction. So they're promoting both sides of that. So they're comfortable with and willing to work with buyer agents. So
the industry really has changed a lot, at least in that sense, in the last 10 to 15 years.
Yes.
Our guest this afternoon is Rich Rosser, who is founder and buyer's broker at Buyers Brokers Only LLC. We'll take a break and we'll come back and continue our conversation with him right here on the Best Money Show on radio on Boston Herald Radio.
Because human genius has now destroyed the impediment of the terrestrial radio.
Boston Herald Radio.
Boston Herald Radio. Now, The Money Show with Rick Schaefer and Susan Kaplan.
Welcome back. Our guest this afternoon is Rich Rosser, who is one of the founders and also a broker at Buyers Brokers Only LLC. There are a lot of good reasons to have a buyer's broker, but I think we've established that the biggest reason is that the buyer has someone whose allegiance is and who was looking out for the best interest solely of the seller, just like the seller's agent is looking out for the best interests of the seller. What that is really is a fiduciary duty. Explain what in legal terms, or in layman's terms actually, what a fiduciary duty is, Rich.
Well, it's a duty to the party you represent, to your client. It's a duty to act on their behalf and in their best interest.
We were talking about dual agencies before. Are there any benefits to? I can't see it, but are there any benefits from the buyer's standpoint of a dual agency?
I mean, obviously, I'm biased, but I can't think of any either.
Okay, I agree with you, so I don't think that's a bias at all. You point out in your literature that despite the benefits, many buyers still don't hire buyer's brokers. Two questions: do you have any? Do you either know or have a guesstimate as to what percentage of buyers do hire buyer's brokers? And whatever the percentage is, do you know why the people who don't hire buyer's brokers don't?
I think if I had to do a guesstimate, I would say probably about 75% or so of transactions include both a listing agent and a buyer agent.
Oh, really? It's gotten that high?
I think it is probably that high.
Okay.
The difference, though, is that a very small percentage of that is exclusive buyer agents.
Mm-hmm.
To answer your question as to why people don't do it, I think there's still this belief that somehow they're going to get a better deal if they don't have a buyer agent.
Mm-hmm.
I think some people just haven't done their homework and don't understand the benefit of having a buyer agent. I think when most people understand why they should have a buyer agent, and most people understand what the benefits of working with a exclusive buyer agent is,
mm-hmm.
They choose to go that route. But I think it's just a matter of you've said on the show many times that people will do quite a bit of research to buy a $40,000 car, but not so much for a $400,000 house.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's the case.
Yeah, I agree. It amazes me how little research people do when they're buying for what 90% of the people in the world is the most expensive thing they're going to buy, or if they buy a number of homes in their lifetime or sell a number of homes in their lifetime, they don't do their research. But let me just get straight. You said you guessed that 75% of people use a buyer's broker, but only a small percentage of those use exclusive buyer's brokers, which I agree with you is really the way to go. But a lot of people think they get a better deal if they do a designated buyer broker, correct?
Well, it's not just that they think they're going to get a better deal, but it's not like the traditional real estate firms are talking to clients about exclusive buyer agents. They're just telling them, we could be your buyer agent, and that's pretty much the end of the conversation. So they're not, obviously not talking to them about the difference between a designated buyer agent and an exclusive buyer agent. The other thing is there's not many of us. Less than 1% of the real estate agents in Massachusetts
mm-hmm.
are exclusive buyer agents. Most traditional firms want to be able to get both sides of the transaction, so that's how they operate their company.
I would assume that you certainly hope and that you expect that the number of exclusive buyer agents only, not having the same name, but the what that describes is going to increase as people become more and more aware of the benefits of having an exclusive buyer agent.
I hope so. Dave and I are trying. We've added about 20 or so exclusive buyer agents in the last 5 or 6 years.
I would assume that in addition to the other things that an exclusive buyer agent does, they can also help point buyers in the direction of good professionals like a property inspector, an attorney, and a lender that they can use.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, we help our clients with recommendations for all those things: lenders, attorneys, home inspectors, insurance agents, and not just say, hey, go hire this man or go hire this woman, but explain to them, what they should be looking for, the questions they should be asking all those other professionals, and trying to help them get a good understanding of what to expect when they, call up these people. Especially the financing part of it. That's could be very complicated, and there's a lot of misinformation floating around out there. So I spend a lot of time with my clients talking to them about financing and things that they should be looking out for. And there's a lot of mortgage programs too. And sometimes you go talk to a mortgage person, and for whatever reason they're sort of kind of pushing people towards one program or another. And sometimes it might not be the best program for that particular buyer. So we try to at least give them all the information so that they can at least ask the questions when they're talking with their mortgage person.
Whenever I tell a seller to get a seller's broker, I tell them one of the most important things is that the seller's broker can help them ascertain what a fair asking price for their property is. I would assume that because as a buyer's broker, you're as aware of the market as a seller's broker is, that one of the things that you help buyers with is figuring out what a fair offering price for a particular property is as well, correct?
Yes, that's a big part of what we do. We call it a CMA, which stands for Comparative Market Analysis. And brokers do it different ways. I like to actually download all the data into a spreadsheet for my clients, so I'm not just telling them that I think a property is worth X amount of money, but I actually give them all the data and say, this is how I came to that conclusion. And it's not just a question of saying, well, this is what the property is worth, but it's also, okay, so how are we going to get, how are we going to negotiate this? What's the strategy? I tell clients all the time, it's important to have a negotiation strategy. Buyers and sellers sometimes get very emotional about the negotiation process.
Yes, they do.
But what I try to explain to buyers is, look, it's a business transaction. You want the best price, they want the highest price. If you have a strategy and just stick to it, it'll take the emotion out of it. So I do talk to my clients a lot about not just what the property is worth, but how we should go about negotiating. And there's so many factors that go into, what someone should offer and what ultimately the agreed upon price is going to be.
A, you took the words right out of my mouth. B, one of the reasons, again, why I tell people to get an attorney is for exactly the reason you're talking about. But in this case, if you have a broker doing the negotiation, it's even better. It takes even more of the emotions out. And as you said, you want to look at it as a business transaction, not an emotional one. Let's segue into Buyers Brokers LLC itself. You told us how it was established. How long have you been around?
It'll be 10 years in November.
Okay, so you've got a lot of experience under your belts. How many brokers does Buyers LLC employ, and what geographic areas do you cover? Do you cover all of Massachusetts, any of New Hampshire?
Yeah, we have, I think, including Dave and I, there's 24 of us now. We cover Eastern Massachusetts, Boston, the North Shore, South Shore, Metro West, Central Mass, and Southern New Hampshire.
So you've gotten to be pretty big. Before we go to a break, one other question. All of the buyers brokers at Buyers Brokers LLC are attorneys, correct?
Yeah, everybody at Buyers Brokers only is a licensed attorney. We only use attorneys as our exclusive buyer agents.
Now, you don't have, by law, you don't have to do that, obviously, but you've decided to. Why did you? I think it's a great idea, but why did you decide to do so?
Well, when Dave and I started the company, we were both attorneys, obviously, and as we started to expand, we worked alone for a couple of years, and the feedback we got from clients was that they really appreciated our knowledge we had about real estate, from going to law school and things like that. So we thought that we wanted to really keep that sort of same level of professionalism throughout the company. So we decided to only employ attorneys.
Frankly, I think it's a great idea. Now, you don't act as their real estate attorney, however. You, in fact, we'll get into a program you have, a refund program, but you urge your clients to also get a real estate attorney to represent them, correct?
Yeah, that's true. We do not do any. We don't provide any legal advice. We're not a law firm. We're a real estate firm. We encourage all of our clients to get attorneys. It's very important to get an attorney. As you know, as an attorney who does real estate, that purchase and sale agreement that every buyer is going to sign at some point is very seller focused, and a good real estate attorney is going to make quite a few modifications to that, and it's important that buyers are protected.
You're 100% right on that. I've got an addendum whenever I represent a buyer that's longer than the purchase and sale agreement itself, simply for that reason, because the standard purchase and sale agreement is very much seller-oriented. Our guest is Rich Rosser, who is both one of the founders and a member of Buyers Brokers Only, LLC. We have to take a break. We'll come back and continue our conversation with him right here on the Best Money Show on radio on Boston Herald Radio.
Boston Herald Radio News will take you up to Lansdowne, out to Upton, and back to the waterfront. Now, The Money Show with Rick Schaefer and Susan Kaplan.
Welcome back. Our guest this afternoon is Rich Rosser. My English is failing me at the end here. Who is one of the founders and is also a broker at buyersbrokersonly.com, who are our exclusive buyer agents. And if you're looking to buy a home, you really should get one. Couple of things. We're up against the clock, but there's a few things I definitely want to get through. We mentioned that although all of your brokers are attorneys, you don't act as attorney. In fact, you give a portion of your commission to the buyers to help offset the cost of a buyer hiring an attorney. Is that correct?
Yes, that's what we do. We don't act as attorneys, and the reason why we don't act as their attorney is because we're trying to provide a business model that is as conflict-free as possible, and so we don't want to be both their attorney and their buyer agent. But we do want people to hire an attorney. It's so important. And so what we do is we give a small portion of the commission back to our buyers after closing so they could offset the cost of their attorney's fees. And basically, the rebate is based on the price of the house, and it's either $200, $350, or $500. That's
an excellent idea. I compliment you for coming up with that idea. You also have, if someone hires Buyers Brokers Only, you have a free home for sales email alert program. Explain what that is.
Sure. Anybody who comes to our website and wants to see the latest listings, they could simply sign up for them, and we're happy to set up what's called an MLS account. With that account, they'll be able to put in a specific search criteria, what city or towns they're interested in, what price range, and they'll get a daily email that tells them any new properties that come on the market that meet their criteria, and also when there's ever any price drops.
How long is the contract that a buyer signs with Buyers Brokers Only for? For example, I usually tell sellers to only sign 3, 4, 5 months at most a contract with the seller's agent. How long is the contract between a buyer's agent and the buyer?
Well, this is another thing that makes us a little bit different. Our feeling has always been that those contracts really have one purpose, and that's to keep buyers working with a particular agent for a particular amount of time. Others would argue that it provides the buyer with some guidelines as to what the buyer agent's responsibilities are. But we don't require a contract. And my feeling has always been that we're going to give 110%. But if for any reason a buyer doesn't think it's a good fit, we don't think they should be stuck with us. We should think that they should be able to move on. Our goal with every client is that when they finish at the closing table, they can't wait to go tell a friend or a family member or a coworker about us. That's our goal, and we don't want any unhappy clients who feel like they were stuck with us. So we don't require a contract. Some people think we're crazy for not having buyers sign a contract, but we don't. There are some things that buyers have to sign. There's some disclosures. The state of Massachusetts has a form called the Massachusetts Mandatory Licensee Disclosure Form, which all real estate agents have to give to clients to explain to them what kind of real estate agent they are?
Frankly, I don't think you're crazy at all, because one of the things I talk about on this show is basically customer service, and companies that give great customer service tend to, it comes back in spades, because people will basically by word of mouth say, if you're going to use this type of company, then you should go to them. And I think the fact that you don't force people to sign a contract is a great idea, and I think it'll serve you well. So congratulations again.
Thank you. I should say one thing. The state of New Hampshire has a law that requires a contract. So what we do in New Hampshire is that we have a contract that says they can terminate the contract at any time in writing.
Right. So they just have to basically, they can terminate any time they want. They just have to give you a written notice, and it's done. So,
and we have to give them a written contract. So it's essentially the same thing, but it's required in New Hampshire that it be in writing.
We've only got about 2 minutes left, so I'm gonna give you, and I feel, frankly, as I told you, I have come around to being, I didn't used to be, but I've come around to being in favor of buyers brokers, and frankly, the research I did on buyers brokers only, I was very impressed with, but having talked to you, and I will tell you, I don't give out compliments like this unless I mean it. I really like the way you guys have basically set up your business model. So you've done a great job. So here's a softball for you. In as many words as you can get out in a couple of minutes, why do you think people should hire Buyers Brokers Only LLC as opposed to another buyer's broker when they hire, if they're buying a piece of property and they need a buyer's broker? And I think people do.
Well, I think first and foremost, people should really, consider hiring an exclusive buyer agent, whether it's Buyers Brokers Only or whether it's another exclusive buyer agent. I think that buyers owe it to themselves to do their homework and to talk to at least one exclusive buyer agent. I hope it'll be one of my brokers, but if it's not, it's so important that I think that when you talk to agents, talk to an exclusive buyer agent and understand the difference. What I would say about our company is, I tell all my brokers, the only thing I want you to do is do what's best for your client, whether it means more work and less money. It doesn't matter. Like you said, good customer service pays off. We've earned the Angie's List Super Service Award in 2010, 12, 13, and 14. We have an A rating on Angie's List. On Yelp, we have a 5-star rating. We have more 5-star reviews than any other real estate company in the state on Yelp. We're proud of that. And I tell all my agents that, the only thing that'll get me mad is if you get a rating that's not an A or not a 5-star.
Rich, you've done a great job. I really do congratulate you. We got to run, but before you do, tell people how they can get in touch with you or somebody at Buyers Brokers Only. Sure,
they could go to buyersbrokersonly.com. That's buyers with an S, brokers with an S, only.com.
Yep.
They can follow us on Facebook, facebook.com/BBO LLC. And if they have general questions, they could call 978-835-5906.
Okay, very quickly, give out the email, the email address and the phone number one more time.
Sure. The website address is buyersbrokersonly.com.
Yep.
And the phone number is 978-835-5906.
Rich Rosser, who is founder and one of the brokers at buyersbrokersonly.com. A pleasure talking to you. A pleasure talking to somebody who's got the right idea on how to run a business. We'll look forward to talking to you again, and best of luck with Buyers Broker. I know you've done well so far, but continued success with Buyers Brokers Only in the future. Thank you very much for joining us. I'm Rick Schaefer. I'll see you Monday at 4 right here on the Best Money Show on radio on Boston Herald Radio.